What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Talking Sports Podcast right here on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you guys drop a like. Make sure you guys comment. And make sure you guys follow us on all social media platforms at Talking Sports PD, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We are posting consistently throughout those platforms. If you're an NFL fan, if you're a college football fan, and if you're a baseball fan, along with other sports as well, make sure you guys follow us on social media. And as always, we are sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. It is the perfect time to get on Underdog Fantasy. MLB playoffs are starting. NFL season, college football season, the NBA season's right around the corner, along with the NHL season. Make sure you guys get on Underdog Fantasy and use code TSP. We have a fun episode for you guys. If you guys are on Spotify, if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're driving to work, if you're driving from work, if whatever you guys are doing, wherever you guys are listening or watching us right now, we really appreciate it. MLB season just wrapped up. Crazy final day. Braves-Mets was an absolute bonkers of a game. Obviously, the Mets won game one. Braves won game two. The Diamondbacks go home, and the Mets get into the playoffs along with the Braves. So an absolute chaotic first game that had the Mets winning. A little bit of a boring second game as the Braves were able to win against the Mets kind of rotational and backup players. And now we are ready for postseason, the best time of the year. So we're going to do some preview episodes here. We're going to start with a wild card preview. We'll give you guys a divisional series preview. We'll give you guys an ALCS and NLCS preview, and then we'll give you guys a World Series preview. So a lot of content coming. So make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you guys subscribe to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is 100% free of charge, but make sure you guys do that. It really means a lot to us. It means a lot to everyone here at Talking Sports Podcast, and it just shows that you guys are completely interested. And let me know in the comment section who you guys got going in this wild card series. So I'm going to start with the AL here. And we have the 6 seed Tigers taking on, let me get this banner up, guys. 6 seed Tigers taking on the 3 seed Astros. The Tigers finished 86 and 76. Astros finished 88 and 73 en route to an AL West division championship once again for the Houston Astros. The Tigers snuck in one of the hottest teams down the stretch and were able to get into the playoffs. So let's talk about this matchup, and I'll give you guys my pick in a second here. The Tigers' rotation is an absolute gauntlet of a rotation, right? They were a top 5 unit this past season. Tariq Skubal is an absolute man on the mound after also losing Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers. So this team trades one of their best starting pitchers and then ends up getting better and ends up going on an absolute tear. The Tigers, since June 1st, guys, have the best record in baseball. This team is coming in scorching hot. They also have a top 5 bullpen this season in ERA. So they're a top 5 unit in ERA by rotation and a top 5 unit in bullpen by ERA. So this team is pitching back end and front end. And you guys know in the playoffs, rotation is great. Pitching wins championships, but you also need a bullpen. You also need some guys to come in the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th, and the 9th, and be able to get you outs, in crucial moments. And I think this Tigers team can do that. Key for them is their offense. It got better in the second half, still not their strength. Riley Green is their main X factor on offense. Flipping over to the Astros, who had a very tough start to the year, right? They were at one point 10 games back of the Seattle Mariners in the AL West. Crazy enough, Seattle Mariners ended up not making the playoffs whatsoever, and the Astros ended up winning the division once again and being the 3 seed in the AL. Astro bullpen not nearly as good as that Detroit Tigers rotation. Astros still have some pretty good guys in the back end in the 8th and 9th, and Brian Abreu and Josh Hader. I don't know if they have the depth that the Tigers do. Valdez, one of the best rotation arms in baseball, 2.91 ERA this season. He'll get the ball in game 1. And then Hunter Brown has had a great, basically 3/4 of the season. Since May 5th, he has the 3rd best ERA in baseball. So Hunter Brown followed up with Valdez. They got an Astros have a nice 1-2 punch. One key injury, and this is the reason I am picking maybe the Tigers. We'll let you know in a second here. Yordan Alvarez is most likely out for this wild card season. And this Astros offense isn't as good as it used to be, right? They still have Bregman. They still have Altuve. They still have Kyle Tucker. It's just not as good as it once was. My pick, Tigers in 3. I think rotation being elite, bullpen being elite, two of the best rotation and bullpen combos in baseball, and being the best team since June 1st has a lot of leverage here. It has a lot of value heading into this series. I like the Tigers. Remember, it's a best out of 3 series in the wild card series. I like the Tigers in 3 to move on and pull off the upset. I think their rotation and their bullpen is just a little bit too much for the Astros. Final wild card series. I know I said final. There's only 2, right? It's funny how that works. But we'll start with the Royals and the Orioles, both teams that did not win their division. The Royals finished as the 5 seed in the AL, 86 and 76, and the Orioles finished as the 4 seed, 91 and 71. Let's start with the Royals, right? I wrote in my notes Bobby Witt Jr. If it wasn't for Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, Bobby Witt Jr. would be the AL MVP. This guy's having an absolute crazy year, and the star prospect that we saw a couple years ago is finally taking shape, and we're seeing the superstar in Bobby Witt Jr. He's a guy that the Royals can lean on, and the Royals that can kind of guide this Royals to a potential series win in this wild card round series at best out of 3. Seth Lugo, kind of a resurrection, right? He was kind of forgotten about on those Mets teams a couple years ago. He's pitching to a 3.00 ERA. He's having an absolute great year, and I think him having a bounce back year, or him just coming into form as a starting pitcher for the Royals, has given them a lot of life and has guided them to 86 wins. And then this guy still does it. He did it in 2015 when the Royals ended up winning the World Series over the Mets. Salvador Perez finished with 27 home runs and 104 RBIs. This guy does not age. This guy does not hit a wall. This guy still produces at the catching position. One of the best catchers in baseball is one of the best hitters in baseball, and that is Salvador Perez. They're going to lean on him, right? Like, you have Bobby Witt Jr., the superstar, the young superstar, no postseason experience. You lean on Salvador Perez in this situation, a guy that has legit postseason experience, the guy that's been to 2 World Series, 1 loss and 1 win. You lean on this guy. I think the Royals' rotation is really good, right? They finished with a collective starting pitching ERA of 3.55, and it's Ragans, Lugo, Waka, and Brady Singer, right? Like, those 4 guys have kind of held their own for this rotation and have given the Royals this chance to get into the postseason. Their bullpen scares me, right? When the Royals won their World Series in 2015, the one thing they leaned on was that bullpen, and they kind of started the trend of, in postseason, going to your bullpen early and yanking your starter at a point if he's struggling, right? Let me just fix my shirt here. But I think Will Smith was a huge addition, right? He's won a couple World Series the last year. He's kind of like, if you get Will Smith, you win the World Series. But I think overall, the Royals bullpen is their weakest link, and that's something that we have to monitor in the series and potentially beyond if they keep going throughout this postseason. Moving on to the Baltimore Orioles, right? Orioles started hot, had a little bit of a lengthy division lead over the Yankees, and then completely faded, right? They faded late in the season. They weren't good in the summer. They weren't good in September, and that division slipped away, and that ended up going to the New York Yankees, who we're not going to talk about because they're not playing in this year in the wild card round. The Orioles offense is still really good, right? Finished 4th in runs scored. And we talked about Bobby Witt Jr. becoming a superstar right in front of our eyes. How about Gunnar Henderson? He became a star right in front of our eyes. He finished with 37 home runs and alluded to a great year at the shortstop position. And he's just a young and up-and-comer, and he's already a superstar. Something that maybe not every single team has in this playoffs is a lineup that is super deep. And I think the Orioles have that, right? Everybody on their lineup has at least about a 2.0 WAR. And I think 1 through 9, they're not easy outs. They're hard outs, and they're going to make you work. So I think even though they struggled in the second half, I think having a deep lineup is going to come in clutch when it comes to the postseason against the Royals here. Corbin Burns, 2.94 ERA. He's a top-of-the-line starter. Zach Eflin has been good for the Orioles. He's another add. This is where the 2 things that scare me when it comes to the Baltimore Orioles. Rotation has been just bitten by injuries from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. They just have not been able to stay healthy or keep guys healthy. And they're also 23rd in bullpen ERA, right? When I read those 2 things, you think, well, I just said pitching wins in October, and the Orioles scare me. After Burns and Eflin, they scare me. Rotation hasn't been great, has a ton of injuries, and bullpen being 23rd. But we saw last year, right? Orioles win the division last year. They're coming in hot into the postseason, and they flame out really early. They just weren't prepared for that playoff series, and they just had no experience. I think this is the year where they can get the job done. I know on paper it sounds like the Royals might be a better team, but I think Orioles offense being fourth in runs scored and having such a deep lineup will combat against a very up and down bullpen and a very non-deep rotation. I like the Orioles in second. It's a gut pick more than an analytics pick and more of a pick that when you read on paper, you think Royals. I think it's more of a gut check pick. And I think it's a pick that where I just think the Orioles are the better team top to bottom. And I think last year they'll use that experience. They'll use how they flamed out really fast in the postseason to their advantage. And I think they take down the Royals in 2 games. Okay, it's a lot of talking here, guys. Let's move on to the NL. And I appreciate everyone that is watching or listening wherever you are doing that. It means a lot. Mets, Brewers. The Mets finished as the 6th seed, funny enough, not even though they clinched the playoffs. They clinched the playoffs before the Braves did, and they still finished as the 6th seed. Funny how that works out. Mets 89-73 versus the Brewers, who won the division at 93-69. Brewers, I just said on paper, I went with my gut in the Orioles and Royals pick. That might come to fruition here as well. Brewers struggle to put balls in play consistently throughout the season, right? They just have been a good offense at times and a very below average offense at times. We'll see what offense they get in this series. Freddie Peralta, great game 1 starter. After that, it's a lot of question marks. Frankie Montez, very up and down. The Brewers find a way to pitch well in big spots, and they pitched well in the regular season. It's just not a lot of household names, and it's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. This is where the mixing and matching comes into fruition. They will lean on this bullpen. This Brewers bullpen finished with the 2nd best ERA in baseball. I expect after Freddie Peralta to see a lot of bullpen games, and especially in a series where it's a best of 3 series, right? It's only 3 games max. You're only guaranteed 2. You're no more guaranteed than 3, right? You have to find a way to do this. And I think after Freddie Peralta, it's going to be a lot of bullpen. The Brewers are going to use their bullpen a lot, and I think that will help them being 2nd best. And then when it comes to the Mets, right? Mets had a very solid offense as they finished top 10 in home runs, right? It wasn't always flashy. It was Mark Vientos coming on out of the scene, right? Raciel Iglesias, adding JD Martinez, right? Pete Alonso being up and down. And then Francisco Lindor, if it wasn't for Shohei Ohtani in the NL, similar to Bobby Witt in the AL, would be the MVP of the National League. He's been great. He had a huge clutch home run to help them get to the postseason against the Braves on Monday. I need more out of Pete Alonso, right? Like I see the home runs and I see the extra base hits, but when it's clutch this year, Pete Alonso is not delivered. And in a series where the Brewers have a good top of the rotation, pitch well, are very fundamentally sound, and have one of the best bullpens in baseball, Pete Alonso has to come in clutch. Has to. Mets rotation. Good, not great, very solid. Finished 19th in starting pitching WAR. I think it's a lot of guys that are not household names, right? Sean Manaea. It's Luis Severino, who we remember as a member of the Yankees, who has not pitched well in big spots. And I think that's something that you have to monitor. As a Yankee, Luis Severino did not pitch well in big spots. He did not pitch well in big spots for the Mets down the stretch when they needed him to clinch a playoff spot. And then something we saw today on Monday against the Braves. Bullpen. The bullpen, I think, is very inconsistent when it comes to the Mets. Edwin Diaz struggled once again, blew a huge lead in the 8th inning, ended up not costing them because of Francisco Lindor. That just can't happen against this Brewers team. The Brewers team is too good, too disciplined, too fundamentally sound, and I think the Mets bullpen is very up in the air. I think where I'm leading towards here is the Brewers, and the Brewers have had the Mets way this year. Brewers have been very good against the Mets, and the Mets have just not been able to squeak out a lot of wins against the Brewers the couple times that they met this year. I think it's a very even series. I think it's a very fun series, and I'm excited for this. I like the Brewers in 3, winning a very, very close playoff series here. And then finally, I think one of the more fun series we have here, and that'd be the Braves versus the Padres. Braves are the 5 seed, 89-73, just sneaking in over the Diamondbacks. in the final day of the regular season versus the Padres, 4 seed, 93-69, losing out on the division to the LA Dodgers. Let's start with the Padres here, guys. Padres, great offense. I literally wrote in my notes, Padres with the great offense. Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Luis Arias, Jackson Morrell, who if it wasn't for Paul Skeens would probably win NL Rookie of the Year, Jurickson Profar, all studs, right? That offense is deadly. That offense is fun. That offense is exciting, right? And you think it stops there. Flip over to the rotation. This rotation is great from top to bottom. Dylan Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, and Joe Musgrove give you 4 guys. And I expect Michael King probably potentially to come out of the pen, or Yu Darvish to come out of the pen, or Joe Musgrove. Right? I think the Padres can do that because their bullpen is their weakest link on this team. Offense is elite, rotation is elite. Bullpen's very middle of the pack, very up and down. I think you use some of your starters in key moments to give your bullpen some length and to make that bullpen even better. But I think this Padres offense is just awesome to watch, and they're fun. Moving on to the Braves, right? Starting with injuries, we talked about the Orioles rotation. This is another team that's dealing with some injuries here, guys. No Acuna, no Austin Riley. Really, really hurts in this series. They still have some legit bats. Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, Jorge Soler make a good 5-man punch there. That a good offense, but I don't love those 2 injuries. I think those could use those 2 bats. And one of the reasons they ended up not winning the division and barely sneaking into the playoffs, obviously they did win 89 games, so they're still a really good team, was because of that. Rotation, major concern, right? Chris Sale out for the series, was scratched on Monday against the Mets with back spasms, will not pitch at all in the AL Wildcard Series. And this is what we're talking about here, AL Wildcard Series. Chris Sale will not pitch at all in the NL Wildcard Series. He'll definitely not pitch in the AL Series because he's not on an AL team. Ronaldo Lopez and Max Fried, major question marks, and I think that's something we have to monitor. Rotation's just very up and down, but we talked about rotation not being great for the Braves. Bullpen is 3rd in ERA, 2nd in strikeout rate, and 2nd in walk rate. They are going to have to lean against this bullpen. This comes down to 2 things for me. Braves rotation being a major concern, and the Padres offense being elite. That leads me to the Padres in 3. Okay, we'll run through this one more time before we get out of here. I appreciate everyone that is watching and listening and subscribing. That just means the world to us, and it just shows you how much you care about the podcast if you hit that subscribe button. So if you're not subscribed, check if you are, and please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. So in the AL, Tigers in 3 defeating the Astros. Orioles over the Royals in 2, and then in the NL, Brewers over the Mets in 3, and the Padres over the Braves in 3. Let me know in the comment section who you guys have. That is going to do it for us. This was the Talking Sports Podcast, our AL and NL MLB Wildcard Series preview. We'll be back at the end of the week to preview the ALDS and the NLDS, and we'll see how good I was on these picks and maybe how bad I was. Like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, we are sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you guys use code TSP for a 100% deposit match up to $100. That is going to do it for us. Enjoy the first round of the MLB series. We'll see you guys later this week. 2 episodes are coming out this week. So we'll see you guys later this week to preview the ALDS and the NLDS. Thank you.